Hi, good afternoon. Just to say, I think we've got a fair amount of time, and I'd like to offer this in a more relaxed way. So I was wondering, we've got quite a few of you standing. I don't know if there's a way for people to sit down, but please, we're going to be more interactive, hopefully. If I don't bore you to death and you fall asleep. And also have a little bit of group engagement a bit later on. Okay, so just to begin or frame this idea of working in the 21st century, I mean, the idea of International Women's Day is both a blessing and a curse. Now, I'm hoping that was controversial enough of a statement to pique your curiosity. Okay, clearly a blessing because, what it does is it really prompts everyone to think about a level playing field and how in the world of work, but not only in the world of work, but specifically here in the world of work, it is not a level playing field for the genders and hasn't been, and there is work to be done to create a level playing field. But why do you think some people feel that it's a curse? So it's not a rhetorical question. Let's see if anyone is brave enough before we go in there.
It'd be nice not to have to celebrate it because it's a non-issue.
Excellent. It would be great, to celebrate it. Not to have to celebrate it would be a victory of sorts. Yes. Any other reasons why it's a curse?
Kind of excludes men by definition.
Exactly. So one of the reasons that people say it's a curse is that, well, this is a woman's problem. Well, this is some kind of a thing about women. When in fact this is about humanity. This is not about women per se. It's about the human environment we live in, and it is just one aspect of that environment which is troubling in the 21st century that we have to do something about. And the idea that we somehow halve it off and say, well, this is a woman's thing, is a bit counterproductive in many ways. So from that point of view, the idea of positioning one particular form of difference, and I think I don't know if it was in Bev, you said it, someone said it before me, it may have been yourself, to say there's a focus on gender equity, but we're also going to look at other forms of difference. In a way, you highlight one form of difference, but you then make invisible other forms of difference. All right, so instead of doing that, what really we're trying to achieve is we're trying to achieve an environment, a working world in the 21st century which is inclusive, no matter what shape or form you are in. Right? That is the real vision. One of the small battles is on gender balance, but the great war is an inclusive environment no matter what shape or form you are. I'm sure you would agree with that. So let's take it from that point of view for a moment. What is the difference between diversity and inclusion? Any takers? What is the difference between diversity and inclusion? Not all at once, it's overwhelming.
Diversity could be having lots of people in the room, and inclusion could be men feeling welcome in the room.
Excellent. 10 out of 10. Special bonus allocation. Special bonus allocation.
I got a cake.
You get a
Well done. Okay, so there's a third concept, so that's absolutely right. There's a third concept called belonging, which is becoming more and more at the cutting edge of this particular thinking in the world. So you have diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And one of the most creative ways I've heard of describing it is it goes like this. Okay, diversity is when you get invited to the party. Inclusion is when at the party someone asks you to dance. And belonging is when you're dancing, you really don't care who's watching and you just go crazy. And why I like that? You like it? Imagine.
You just said you have to be
Exactly. Now, if you think, let's just apply that to the world of work and to the first concept, which is this idea, International Women's Day and the gender pay gap and these targets. You can see what we're trying to do there is we're trying to get invitations to the party. We say, look, there's just not enough invitations to the party. There's some inclusion, which is when you're at the party, you've got to get paid the same. You've got an equal amount of opportunity to be asked to dance. Okay? But as yet, there's very little around how do you feel being at the party. Is this a party you even want to be at? And do you feel free to kind of be yourself? All right. So let's kind of look at what those conditions are. And that's really what I want to kind of talk about. I want to talk about what are the conditions for an inclusive environment. And here's where the real rubber hits the road. Question mark. Is an increase in diversity guaranteed to result in business advantage, in real commercially improved outcomes? Does increased diversity give you better decision making and as a result, better outcomes in commerce? Again, it's not a rhetorical question, and I wouldn't mind some takers. So, all those that feel that if you increase diversity based on the definition I've just given you, which is, invitations to the party, okay, people that you get to come to the party, you get an increase in performance in the research by virtue of doing that, commercial performance. Raise your hands if you think that is the case. Great, and raise your hand if you do not think that's necessarily the case. And raise your hand if you're now unsure, because you realize this is a kind of trick set of questions. Anyone? Okay. So, here's the answer. It turns out, and it's not a popular thing to say, but I'll qualify it. It turns out in the research that having increased diversity in a team is not enough. It is not enough to ensure an improve in commercial outcomes, and improvements in commercial outcomes. In fact, what is distressing to note is that sometimes when you increase the diversity in a team, there are certain conditions in which you get decreased commercial outcomes. Does this shock you? This is not, but there's not headlines in a newspaper. But I'm going to qualify it all. What do you think the conditions are whereby you increase the diversity in a team and you reduce the commercial outcomes by doing that? Can you think of such conditions? What would those be?
By bringing different people into a room who don't necessarily have anything in common apart from the fact that they're different, so to mean that they are diverse, and may make the team dynamic more brittle or more.
Another, do you get extra cake as well? Okay, let's use language, which is an agnostic form of diversity, as our frame of reference. Everyone speaks English, right? You get quite a high degree of functioning in that team. Now you increase the diversity of language in the team, and you have a team of 5, and now they speak 5 different languages. What will happen to the effectiveness of the team? Now we can see it, so you don't need to be super smart to work out that's not going to be good, because people will not understand each other. Right? Right. But hold on, you've got 5 different languages, which means you've got lots of different ways of thinking about the commercial situation from different perspectives, from different geographical influences. Surely in the room, there is available to you a richer environment to make that decision. Yes? But we just said that if you speak 5 different languages, you will not achieve the aggregation of all that diverse understanding to get to a better commercial situation. So what would be required in a team of 5 with 5 different languages to really draw on all that difference to achieve an improved decision on a particular commercial task? What would you need to create in that room?
Translator.
A translator. Do we have enough cakes? Very smart. You need translation. Yes? Okay. And what does that type of, what would the translator do? We would create shared understanding. Shared understanding. Now we start to get to the concept of shared understanding. Because shared understanding is about shared appreciation. Yes? Okay, I know where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying. You're starting to see how this works. Okay. Now, the truth is, having a translator would still not be very efficient. Yes? You might still be more efficient if you all spoke English but you had similar views than if you all spoke different languages with different views, but it gets aggregated by a translator, and you still might not get there. Why not?
Is it slow? The stuff that's lost in translation?
Slow, stuff's lost in, very good, lost in translation, yes, and think about it. it's not enough that you all understand each other either.
You might not have a common goal.
You might not have a common goal, but what you might have is disagreement. Right? So it might be that I understand how you see this because you speak Japanese, you have a Japanese view. I understand how you see this because you speak English, you have a British view. I understand how you can see I can go on. That's not, just because now we translate and understand is not enough still for us to aggregate to a point of view. What you need more than just translation? Agreement. Right? You need to get to a point where you actually agree. And the word aggregate and agree have the same Latin roots. That means that the synergy or the combination of these perspectives is greater than any one perspective by itself. Yes? Okay. So does anyone know the book Wisdom of Crowds? Anyone read the book Wisdom of Crowds? Raise your hand if you know it. Okay. It's a brilliant book. It's about 15 years old. And I highly recommend it if you want to look at it. And what that's a purely statistical, it's a kind of purely statistical quantitative perspective on whether or not the knowledge of many is superior to the knowledge of one. So for example, here's the question. If you're an expert in a field versus if you are a lay person in a field, the expert statistically would have a better opinion on that field than a lay person. Yes, true, turns out it's true. Surprise, surprise. But if you have 20 people who are lay in a field and one expert, whose opinion is better? The excellent aggregation of 20 people versus the one expert. Now, who watches Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Remember that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And you have two options. You have phone a friend, and then you have 50-50. And then you have ask the audience. Okay. Which of these three, in an analysis of all Who Want to Be a Millionaire shows, which of these three turn out to be the most effective choice to help a person answer a question when they don't know the answer? Statistically. Ask the audience. Isn't that interesting? Right? Not phone your friend who's like this, bookworm genius at home. Turns out not that effective. Turns out ask the audience is by far statistically, I think it's several standard deviations actually, superior. They're almost always right. But one of the more interesting pieces, and I'll give you this as the last piece before we get back to diversity and inclusion and its relationship with competitive advantage. One of the pieces in Wisdom of Crowds that he talks about is that there was a situation at some point during the century, I don't have my dates right, where there was a sunken ship off the coast of the US. And they were trying to locate it and where it first lost. At the last time that lost contact with, what would you call it, radar. And they were trying to locate it. The military was trying to locate it. And they gave the task to some particular military colonel. And what he decided to do was, instead of choosing one particular specialist, so there were people who are specialists in weather and how it affects the movement of vessels. There are people who are specialists in sea currents, and there's these different kinds of specialists. What he did was he asked each of the specialists to independently guess where not guess, I suppose it's not a guess, but work out where this ship is underwater. And then he said he had 4 different specialists. They weren't allowed to talk to each other, which is a very interesting piece of this research. And then he looked at those 4 position points and he aggregated them. And the point that it aggregated at was very close to where the vessel was found. But any one of the other 4 points was further away. Okay? So what this comes down to is another condition. So you need the translation. So you need the diversity, you need the translation, but then you need certain conditions. And those conditions are about aggregation. And one of these conditions is that you have to be able to think independently of the other voices and have your point of view included in the consideration. Because what happens is if you put the 4 together and you don't say come up with where the thing is, and you say work together and together come up as to where the vessel is, you don't get as good an outcome. Why not?
Different personalities, dominant personalities.
We're getting double cakes now. I'm not sure if you need to share. Say again your point.
You can get dominant personalities and people who don't get a chance to speak. Someone is
Exactly right.
all that
The
dynamic.
dominance of certain individuals. Group dynamics. So of the 4 people, they're 4 experts, with one super extroverted and bombastic, probably South African. Sorry, Ben, I speak by myself. Okay. Whereas another one's more introverted, less likely to interrupt, etc. Okay. One view then dominates the other view, reduces its importance in the aggregation, and then reduces the accuracy of the outcome. Okay. So what condition is that? If you create a condition where all the voices can be heard, irrespective of who's dominant, based on the merit of what the person brings, what condition would that be?
Democracy.
Inclusivity. Interesting, the term inclusivity comes up. It's truly inclusive, right? Okay, so I'm just going to pause. There's loads and loads more research on this. Very, very good research. But basically, I think you, at this point, can get the picture. It's not, you need diversity, A, but it's not enough to improve your business, okay? You need translation, so you need a methodology of mutual understanding, shared, as Bev said, common purpose. You all kind of joined up on the task. We all know we're trying to find the ship where it's sank. That's important, that you're working toward the same goal. And then you need an environment in which you don't have the team or the group or the company culture or dynamics shut down certain of those different voices, which destroys the whole strength of that aggregation. Right? That's inclusivity and belonging. Belonging is the idea is that I can be myself. I can actually open my mouth. Right? So there are a lot of things that reduce this. One of the things that reduce these conditions, the number one condition that reduces the effective aggregation of inclusivity, does anyone know what that is? You get 3 cakes for this. Ask yourself. Fear's right, but what causes it? They don't want to be different. Yeah, all these are absolutely correct, but the number one condition, what within culture is hierarchy. Ask yourself. You're in the room, someone that's, job grade 564 and you job grade 222, they're Supreme Galactic Commander level, and you are only Assistant Orange Peter level. Yeah? You might go, I know where the boat is that sunk. No. And the more that they assert their opinion, the less likely you are to challenge it. Right? Okay? So in culture terms, so it's in cultural theory, we call this power distance. If you're familiar with Hofstadter's analyses of organizational cultures, high levels of power distance. This is where people defer to seniority as if senior people are more intelligent. Which, I don't know if you worked this out, but just because you're more senior in the company does not mean you are more intelligent. Okay. It's amazing how many people need to be reminded of this fact. By the way, it's mostly the people who are senior in the company that need to be reminded. Because the others know. No offense, sorry. It's a free gig, I'm not being paid, so I can say what I want. It's not a job. Okay. Said in jest, but that is why. Okay, is that there's a fear, which is absolutely right, that there will be repercussions for you having a different point of view to someone who has more power than you. Okay? And so, let's pause. So in order to create a 21st century working environment with a level playing field, not only for men and women, but for all forms of shapes, of sizes, and types of human beings, we need to create, number one, enough tickets to come to the party so that you do have, if people aren't at the party, what's the point? So you absolutely need your diversity targets, and you absolutely have to get the numbers in there, otherwise you might as well not play. But that is definitely not enough. Not only is it not enough, if you don't do the next steps relatively quickly, you could make it worse, because now you have all this difference and you have this undercurrent. If you don't create inclusivity, you've got this undercurrent Yeah. Now let's talk about the downside of that undercurrent. Let's take gender. What do we see in the world of work today? We do see more women in the world of work, but we also see the introduction of a new dynamic, a negative dynamic that reduces inclusivity, which is when men and women are together in the world of work, there's this unsaid conversation about how come you are here? How did you get here? Right? And it works in both directions. Right? You have men and women looking at women and saying, did she deserve to get here? Or was she here by virtue of some kind of strategy? Yeah? Very undermining. What do you think that does to inclusivity, to hierarchy, to really, it destroys it. The reverse, we look at men and say, you're here, you know why are you here? Because you're a man, it's easy to get you, you just walk through. Your privilege got you here. I worked hard to get you. You got you just because you have this particular gender. How well do you think that goes down? And that underlying conversation destroys the possibility of a positive aggregation of views. It's just one. There are loads and loads of these, but that's a very well-known one. Okay. So what we're trying to do in creating inclusive environments is not simple or easy. I mean, if you're really doing this because you think it makes a better world, and not just a better world in terms of society, but a better world in terms of better commerce, then the call for attention to this is far greater than perhaps we realized. There are a lot of people that think that, what we've got to do is just put more of different people to work together, and then declare victory and all will be well. When in fact, it's a much greater task than that. And it begins and ends with leadership. Begins and ends with leadership. Okay? Because let's go to a meeting, let's make it real. You're in a meeting, you've got a mix of people, different languages, different genders, different cultures. Okay? What have we discovered? Rank, power, is the greatest barrier to creating an environment where everyone can speak and feel free to be themselves, right? Therefore, the reverse is also true. The use of rank and power through leadership is the number one lever to unlock and create an inclusive environment. Because in the same way that whoever's chairing the meeting, who has the authority, he or she, and if you want to go to the US, you can't just say he or she anymore, because you've got gender fluidity, right? So whatever that person is, if they have authority, they can assert certain conditions. Now this can be super, super simple. It could be as simple as saying, hold on everyone, you haven't said anything, Bev, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. What do you think? Right? Now we all know these tricks. Many of you, I can see, been here for a while. I'm not going to pick, but I can see not everyone here has their first year of World of Work, so it's a good idea to say, what do you think when people are not speaking? But that frame is so much more significant than we realize. Of course, it's not just asking the question, what do you think? But it's whether or not it's an authentic request. Because people are so much more attuned than we realize. Yeah? They are so much more aware that they're being asked this question as a form over substance, or they are substantively being asked this question. And everyone in the room knows. Yeah? So the form of leadership we're looking for is not just that you try to get that aggregation by using your managerial rank, but that it really is what you believe, and it can be felt, and it cannot be substituted with political correctness. The number one barrier to an inclusive environment where a firm has already got people in, and there's a mix, and they've got the right cultural values, and they do the right leadership development training, the number one barrier at that point for it to work is political correctness. Why do you think that research shows that?
That's not real.
Because it's not real. There's a 3. You get 3. Because it's not real. Because people know that it's nonsense, right? Yes, he or she's saying that because it's supposed to say that. But I can't say anything because it's correct what he's saying, right? And there's no way to... How do you challenge that? No one makes a mistake. They say all the right things, but they don't really mean it. So there's a famous story in the High Court. It's a barrister, and this barrister, is saying his thing in court, and the judge eventually feels offended by the barrister's tone, and stops the barrister and says, "Sir, are you?" The judge says to the barrister, I don't know if they say sir. What do you call a barrister in court? We'll go with sir. "Sir, are you showing your contempt for this court?" And the person responds and says, "Not at all, my lord. I am doing everything I can to hide it." Okay. Now, it's a good joke, but the truth is that, one can't you cannot make rules for how someone feels. I can tell you, you may not insult this person. You have to include this person. Everyone should be treated fairly. Here are the rules. But I can't say to you, and you have to feel in your heart that this person is just as capable as you are. How are we going to do that? We can't do that, right? And what the truth is that you all can feel it, though. You can feel when someone is, not being real with you. So one of the traps that organizations face is that they put all the right things in place, the behaviors are held to, but the hearts and minds of the individuals are not there. And that's where it comes to some of this work which I heard that you're doing, which is around personal development. It's actually organizations that are taking responsibility for truly growing human beings to become more inclusive in the way that they are. It doesn't mean that it will be successful, but that is part of that strategy. All right, I'm going to, just pause for a moment. I want to just see any comments or questions or points of interest before we go to the next section now. Any thoughts? Spend 10 minutes and be quiet. Anything else?
I think, because it's all about being real and authentic and in your heart, but it's making sure when you're choosing people that you know whether that's their view or not. And how do you interview, or how do you choose based on that? Because I think it is a really important point.
So how do we recruit?
How do you measure it?
How do you recruit authentic people who are
Really
aligned to these cultural values, so that you don't recruit, racist, sexist, bigoted people?
Exactly.
Okay.
You may not know that in an hour.
Yes. So there's this 30-second test you can do, and it's free and it's on the internet. And if you do it, then you know if the person's racist, bigoted, or sexist. And I'll just send it to. No, just kidding. By the way, anyone who invents that will be richer than you can possibly imagine really, really quickly. So unfortunately, Rhapsody, it's very difficult to tell. But I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle. So I'm going to go into the next section because you prompted me, and then we can do an exercise. Okay. All right. So where are we going? Where are we going for this? Human systems, living systems, okay, are alive and they think for themselves, like a garden. Who likes gardening here? English love gardening. Anyone love gardening, right? Okay. Do you grow your garden? No. You can't, right? Who's growing your garden? You've tried it. Well, you just grow, isn't it? Am I right? So who's growing your garden? And I know religious people say God, but okay, fine, we know. But nature's. The garden is growing itself because it's alive. Okay? What is the gardener doing? Nurturing, pruning, creating frames. Yes? Directing, coaxing, watering, right? Yeah? Agricultural models are actually quite good for business in a way that we never realized. What you're trying to do, we're coming back to this point about, do we have to find these really cool people to come and work in our company? Is that the game? Because if we find these cool people who are not full of themselves. They don't think they, what my late mother used to call a stuffed shirt. You know what a stuffed shirt is? You can, sort of people who walk around like this, and they've lost their passport because they always ask people, do you know who I am? I thought that was funny. I was a tough audience. But, so if you find these particular types of really cool people and you put them in your company, then it'll go well. And that has been some of the thinking, but it turns out it's not true. And I'll tell you why it's not true. Because the people out there and the people in here are the same people. We're all actually the same aggregation of people. Haven't you ever noticed that you could have done very well in one company but very poorly in another in the same job? Right? Sorry, let me rephrase. All of you would be brilliant everywhere. But the idea is that the same person can do brilliantly in one company, and then you go and recruit them and they do terribly in this company, and vice versa. And why is that? We say because the culture's not right. All right? But if we really think about it, value creation is about the chemistry between you as an individual and the context you're in. So I use the metaphor of fish in a fish tank. You see, what happens is, we look at the fish tank and we see, these fish are not swimming around so well, okay? They're not performing like we'd like them to, okay? It's Xerox, obviously. Just check, Xerox is your competitor, right? I was horrified to have to say to Bev that we've got these Xerox machines in our 42 offices around the world.
Bev, you need to do something.
Yeah, we need to sort it out. So what are we going to do? Okay, what we do? Let's take the fish out the fish tank and let's clean the fish. Let's check their health. Let's send them on a leadership development program. Yeah, and then they can do storytelling, and then they can learn about the wisdom of Churchill and the brilliance of Jack Welch. More recently, Elon Musk. He's an ex-South African, I should say. And then, they'll get really excited about things. They'll learn case studies from other companies. We'll get the best universities to come and share. And then we'll put them back in the fish tank, and they'll swim around so much better and they'll perform better. I mean, this is how it works, right? Isn't it? Okay. So what happens when we do this with the fish is, it's true. They go on this thing, they come back, and for the first 48 hours, they are darting around that fish tank. They're jumping out the thing, spinning, whatever. But by the third day, when you wake up and you look in the fish tank, the fish are sort of they're like this again. And they're trying to, and then by the fourth day, they're back to that lackluster that you had before you sent them on this brilliant program. And why is that? Okay, you get an extra cookie now for this. Why do you think that?
The culture's still the same.
You've got to change the water.
Because you haven't checked the water. Both of you are right, of course, because it's the water in the fish tank that's the problem, and no one's checking the water. But year after year, spending a fortune, taking the fish out and fixing them, and then putting them back in the water, and the water's actually getting worse, by the way, right? And we can't understand why HR isn't fixing the people, right? And then we think, well, the leadership program must be a bad one, or right? But who's checking the water? Because in the end, it's the water that makes the difference. Okay, and so when we look at finding these amazing people, yes, this is true. It is important to look in the market and find good people and kind of really think carefully about selecting them and matching them. This is true. But it actually has a limited effect on the long-term sustainable performance inside the organization. Because if you take brilliant people from the market, you find, let's say you've got to recruit 100 people and you get 100 Elon Musks. I don't know, is he highly rated by Rico? I don't know. And you put 100 Elon Musks in a fish tank where the water is dirty, your outcome over a period of time is poor. However, let's look at it differently. What if you recruit ordinary people, like us? except for one or two of you are brilliant. But we regular people, we aren't these, you know, supreme galactic geniuses. We like the people out there, right? But you put them in an incredibly amazing fish tank where the water is crystal, where there are these very cool little things that they can swim around and they get the right food. What happens to their performance? It shoots up. And what happens is you put a new fish in who's just ordinary, and he or she looks at the other fish doing these cool things and goes, hey, I can also do that, and starts doing that. So the real work of the 21st century workplace is less about the individual, about finding brilliant people. Then, after you've recruited them, training them in a brilliant way, or paying them in a special way that makes them do amazing things. Okay, or giving them an opportunity to go to Harvard University for some fancy exposure, or to go to the mountains and meditate and smell the cool air. I don't know. Right? It's really about creating amazing water in an amazing fish tank. And then you can recruit everyday people like you and me, and the environment becomes amazing. And what do we see in these amazing environments? We see innovation. What is innovation? Innovation is born from people being able to think, in inverted commas cliche, outside the box. But what's the box? The box is the limited context of your thinking. And in order to think outside the box, you have to think for yourself. And you are only going to do that in certain conditions. Conditions of, and here's the link to where I started, and I'm going to stop here, conditions of inclusivity. It's the same conditions that make a woman feel comfortable in a world of work which is dominated by men are the exact same conditions which create the context for any human being to be innovative and come up with out of the ordinary solution. Are the exact same conditions where people don't need to be paid to be motivated. I mean, you need a basic pay, obviously. So you drop your payroll in. Little trick we learned there. But people just need a certain amount of money. But if they're in this amazing environment, they will work 16-hour days and they'll love doing it. Whereas you can pay them 10 times what they want to be paid, but if they hate the fish, the water, you're still not going to get it out of them. I mean, I have stand-up fights with our CEO, where he says, you know, you've got to find the special people. We've got to find the special people. Your recruiters. And I say, well, no, I don't think that's actually the trick. I think the trick is to make a special environment. You know, and he said, no, you do that too. I said, okay, we'll do both, because that's obviously the perfect combo.